Hello friends, you are welcome to our literary channel Academic Domain. Today we will discuss the introduction, summary, analysis, themes, and characters in the play The Merchant of Venice by William Shakespeare. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please subscribe to it and hit the bell icon to get notifications of upcoming videos. Kindly like, share and give your valuable suggestions through comments. The Merchant of Venice is a play by William Shakespeare, believed to have been written between 1596 and 1598. A merchant in Venice named Antonio defaults on a large loan taken out on behalf of his dear friend, Bassanio, and provided by a Jewish moneylender, Shylock, with seemingly inevitable fatal consequences. Although classified as a comedy in the first folio and sharing certain aspects with Shakespeare's other romantic comedies, the play is most remembered for its dramatic scenes, and it is best known for the character Shylock and his famous demand for a pound of flesh. The play contains two famous speeches, that of Shylock, "Hath not a Jew eyes?" on the subject of humanity, and that of Portia on the quality of mercy. Debate exists on whether the play is anti-Semitic, with Shylock's insistence on his legal right to the pound of flesh being in opposition to his seemingly universal plea for the rights of all people suffering discrimination. Characters. Antonio, he is a prominent merchant of Venice in a melancholic mood. Bassanio, he is Antonio's close friend, suitor to Portia, later the husband of Portia. Gratiano, he is a friend of Antonio and Bassanio, in love with Nerissa, later the husband of Nerissa. Lorenzo, he is a friend of Antonio and Bassanio, in love with Jessica, later the husband of Jessica. Portia, she is a rich heiress, later the wife of Bassanio. Nerissa, she is Portia's waiting maid, in love with Gratiano, later the wife of Gratiano, disguises herself as Portia's clerk. Balthazar, he is Portia's servant. Stefano, he is also Portia's servant. Shylock, he is a miserly Jew, moneylender, father of Jessica. Jessica, she is the daughter of Shylock, later the wife of Lorenzo. Tubal, he is a Jew, friend of Shylock. Launcelot Gobbo, he is a servant of Shylock, later a servant of Bassanio, son of Old Gobbo. Old Gobbo, he is the blind father of Launcelot. Leonardo, he is the servant to Bassanio. Duke of Venice, the authority who presides over the case of Shylock's bond. Prince of Morocco, he is a suitor to Portia. Prince of Aragon, he is also a suitor to Portia. Salarino and Salanio, they are the friends of Antonio and Bassanio. Salario, he is a messenger from Venice, friend of Antonio, Bassanio and others. Some other characters are magnificos of Venice, officers of the court of justice, jailers, servants to Portia, and other attendants. Dr. Bellario, he is the cousin of Portia, a character by reference who does not appear on stage. Summary of the play. Bassanio, a young Venetian of noble rank, wishes to woo the beautiful and wealthy heiress Portia of Belmont. Due to the loss in his business, he is out of money and needs 3,000 ducats to subsidize his expenditures as a suitor. Bassanio approaches his friend Antonio, a wealthy merchant of Venice, who has previously and repeatedly bailed him out. Antonio agrees, but since he does not has cash as his ships and merchandise are busy at sea to Tripolis, the Indies, Mexico and England, he promises to cover a bond if Bassanio can find a lender, so Bassanio turns to the Jewish moneylender Shylock and names Antonio as the loan's guarantor. Antonio has already antagonized Shylock through his outspoken anti-Semitism, and because Antonio's habit of lending money without interest forces Shylock to charge lower rates. Shylock is at first reluctant to grant the loan, citing abuse he has suffered at Antonio's hand. He finally agrees to lend the sum to Bassanio without interest upon one condition: if Antonio were unable to repay it at the specified date, Shylock may take a pound of Antonio's flesh. Bassanio does not want Antonio to accept such a risky condition. Antonio is surprised by what he sees as the moneylender's generosity. No usance, interest, is asked for, and he signs the contract. With money in hand, Bassanio leaves for Belmont with his friend Gratiano, who has asked to accompany him. Gratiano is a likable young man, but he is often flippant, overly talkative, and tactless. Bassanio warns his companion to exercise self-control, and the two leave for Belmont. Meanwhile, in Belmont, Portia is awash with suitors. Her father left a will stipulating that each of her suitors must choose correctly from one of 3 caskets, made of gold, silver and lead respectively. Whoever picks the right casket wins Portia's hand. The first suitor, the Prince of Morocco, chooses the gold casket, interpreting its slogan, "Who chooseth me shall gain what many men desire," as referring to Portia. The second suitor, the conceited Prince of Aragon, chooses the silver casket, which proclaims, "Who chooseth me shall get as much as he deserves, as he believes he is full of merit." Both suitors leave empty-handed, having rejected the lead casket because of the baseness of its material and the uninviting nature of its slogan, "Who chooseth me must give and hazard all he hath." The last suitor is Bassanio, whom Portia wishes to succeed, having met him before. As Bassanio ponders his choice, members of Portia's household sing a song that says that fancy, not true love, it is engendered in the eye. With gazing fed, Bassanio chooses the lead casket and wins Portia's hand. At Venice, Antonio's ships are reported lost at sea, so the merchant cannot repay the bond. Shylock has become more determined to exact revenge from Christians because his daughter Jessica eloped with the Christian Lorenzo and converted. She took a substantial amount of Shylock's wealth with her, as well as a turquoise ring which Shylock had been given by his late wife, Leah. Shylock has Antonio brought before court. At Belmont, Bassanio receives a letter telling him that Antonio has been unable to repay the loan from Shylock. Portia and Bassanio marry, as do Gratiano and Portia's handmaid Nerissa. Bassanio and Gratiano leave for Venice, with money from Portia, to save Antonio's life by offering the money to Shylock. Unknown to Bassanio and Gratiano, Portia sent her servant, Balthazar, to seek the counsel of Portia's cousin, Bellerio, a lawyer, at Padua. The climax of the play is set in the court of the Duke of Venice. Shylock refuses Bassanio's offer of 6,000 ducats, twice the amount of the loan. He demands his pound of flesh from Antonio. The Duke, wishing to save Antonio but unable to nullify a contract, refers the case to a visitor. He identifies himself as Balthazar, a young male, doctor of the law, bearing a letter of recommendation to the Duke from the learned lawyer Bellerio. The doctor is Portia in disguise, and the law clerk who accompanies her is Nerissa, also disguised as a man. As Balthazar, Portia in a famous speech repeatedly asks Shylock to show mercy, advising him that mercy is twice blessed, it blesseth him that gives and him that takes. However, Shylock adamantly refuses any compensations and insists on the pound of flesh. As the court grants Shylock his bond and Antonio prepares for Shylock's knife, Portia deftly appropriates Shylock's argument for specific performance. She says that the contract allows Shylock to remove only the flesh, not the blood, of Antonio. See quibble. Thus, if Shylock were to shed any drop of Antonio's blood, his lands and goods would be forfeited under Venetian laws. She tells him that he must cut precisely 1 pound of flesh, no more, no less. She advises him that, if the scale do turn but in the estimation of a hair, thou dewiest, and all thy goods are confiscate. Defeated, Shylock consents to accept Bassanio's offer of money for the defaulted bond, first his offer to pay the bond thrice, which Portia rebuffs, telling him to take his bond, and then merely the principal, but Portia also prevents him from doing this, on the ground that he has already refused it, in the open court. She cites a law under which Shylock, as a Jew and therefore an alien, having attempted to take the life of a citizen, has forfeited his property, half to the government and half to Antonio, leaving his life at the mercy of the Duke. The Duke spares Shylock's life and says he may remit the forfeiture. Portia says the Duke may waive the state's share, but not Antonio's. Antonio says he is content that the state waive its claim to half Shylock's wealth if he can have his 1/2 share, in use, until Shylock's death, when the principal would be given to Lorenzo and Jessica. Antonio also asks that, for this favor, Shylock convert to Christianity and bequeath his entire estate to Lorenzo and Jessica. The Duke then threatens to recant his pardon of Shylock's life unless he accepts these conditions. Shylock, re-threatened with death, accepts with the words, "I am content." Bassanio does not recognize his disguised wife, but offers to give a present to the supposed lawyer. First she declines, but after he insists, Portia requests his ring and Antonio's gloves. Antonio parts with his gloves without a second thought, but Bassanio gives the ring only after much persuasion from Antonio, as earlier in the play he promised his wife never to lose, sell or give it. Nerissa, as the lawyer's clerk, succeeds in likewise retrieving her ring from Gratiano, who does not see through her disguise. At Belmont, Portia and Nerissa taunt and pretend to accuse their husbands before revealing they were really the lawyer and his clerk in disguise. After all the other characters make amends, Antonio learns from Portia that 3 of his ships were not stranded and have returned safely after all. Themes in the play: Shylock and the anti-Semitism debate. The play is frequently staged, but is potentially troubling to modern audiences because of its central themes, which can easily appear anti-Semitic. Modern critics argue over the play's stance on the Jews and Judaism. American literary critic Harold Bloom argued in 1998 that one would have to be blind, deaf and dumb not to recognize that Shakespeare's grand, equivocal comedy The Merchant of Venice is nevertheless a profoundly anti-Semitic work. Shylock as an antagonist. English society in the Elizabethan and Jacobean era has been described as Judeophobic. English Jews had been expelled under Edward I in 1290 and were not permitted to return until 1656 under the rule of Oliver Cromwell. Poet John Donne, who was Dean of St. Paul's Cathedral and a contemporary of Shakespeare, gave a sermon in 1624 perpetuating the blood libel, the entirely unsubstantiated anti-Semitic lie that Jews ritually murdered Christians to drink their blood and achieve salvation. In Venice and in some other places, Jews were required to wear a yellow or red hat at all times in public to make sure that they were easily identified, and had to live in a ghetto. Shakespeare's play may be seen as a continuation of this tradition. The title page of the quarto indicates that the play was sometimes known as The Jew of Venice in its day, which suggests that it was seen as similar to Marlowe's early 1590s work The Jew of Malta. One interpretation of the play's structure is that Shakespeare meant to contrast the mercy of the main Christian characters with the Old Testament vengefulness of a Jew, who lacks the religious grace to comprehend mercy. Similarly, it is possible that Shakespeare meant Shylock's forced conversion to Christianity to be a happy ending for the character, as, to some Christian audiences, it saves his soul and allows him to enter heaven. Shylock as a sympathetic character. Many modern readers and theatergoers have read the play as a plea for tolerance, noting that Shylock is a sympathetic character. They cite as evidence that Shylock's trial, at the end of the play, is a mockery of justice, with Portia acting as a judge when she has no right to do so. The characters who berated Shylock for dishonesty resort to trickery in order to win. It is difficult to know whether the sympathetic reading of Shylock is entirely due to changing sensibilities among readers or that Shakespeare, a writer who created complex, multifaceted characters, deliberately intended this reading. One of the reasons for this interpretation is that Shylock's painful status in Venetian society is emphasized. To some critics, Shylock's celebrated, "hath not a Jew eyes" speech redeems him and even makes him into something of a tragic figure. In the speech, Shylock argues that he is no different from the Christian characters. Even if Shakespeare did not intend the play to be read this way, the fact that it retains its power on stage for audiences who may perceive its central conflicts in radically different terms is an illustration of the subtlety of Shakespeare's characterizations. In the trial, Shylock represents what Elizabethan Christians believed to be the Jewish desire for justice, contrasted with their obviously superior Christian value of mercy. The Christians in the courtroom urge Shylock to love his enemies, although they themselves have failed in the past. Jewish critic Harold Bloom suggests that, although the play gives merit to both cases, the portraits are not even-handed. Shylock's shrewd indictment of Christian hypocrisy delights us, but Shakespeare's intimations do not alleviate the savagery of his portrait of the Jew. Antonio, Bassanio. Antonio's unexplained depression, In sooth I know not why I am so sad, and utter devotion to Bassanio has led some critics to theorize that he is suffering from unrequited love for Bassanio and is depressed because Bassanio is coming to an age where he will marry a woman. In his plays and poetry Shakespeare often depicted strong male bonds of varying homosociality, which has led some critics to infer that Bassanio returns Antonio's affections despite his obligation to marry. The great thing about Shakespeare and why he's so difficult to pin down is his ambiguity. He's not saying they're gay or they're straight, he's leaving it up to his actors. I feel there has to be a great love between the two characters, there's great attraction. I don't think they have slept together, but that's for the audience to decide. Hope you liked the presentation. Thanks for watching the video.